I'm going to move
It's
these
a long
flowers.
walk. Sorry.
They're so pretty, but we're going to have a conversation. I want to be able to see you.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Yes. All right.
So 10, 11, 12, something like that years ago, we kind of talked about this in the video, but I started having pretty serious questions, and it was really, really scary. And honestly, I think back then, the way I would have described what was happening is that it felt like I was drowning. Like, truly, Jody, like it felt like our life was over. And so I would definitely have called that a faith crisis. And it is pretty wild to fast forward, and there was no way I could have imagined that it was going to be okay. And or imagine this room and talking about this with anybody else. But you've been working on, so we just released this course that Zach mentioned, Your Faith Journey. And I feel like as the years have passed, what has happened is that crisis really did become a journey, and it stopped feeling so threatening, and it started feeling like there was joy to be found even in all of the uncertainty. And that's been the gift of all of the conversations that we're having on the podcast with Faith Matters. But your tools have been so useful for me over the years, and I wish that I had them on day one, because I think it would have talked me out of a faith crisis and into a faith journey like so much sooner. Another tool that I feel like I've really appreciated, and I'm going to shout out somebody in the audience, Sally. I don't know where she is, but I was having a conversation with a friend who she said the other day that she felt like maybe part of what we're supposed to learn from the atonement is to feel our feelings, because Jesus went to the garden and he knelt and he asked for witnesses, and he felt his feelings so intensely that he bled from every pore, and that was so it felt like electrifying, because I think that's so uncomfortable for me, and I try very hard not to feel the feelings that are scary or that are negative. And maybe part of what we're meant to learn and heal from, that Christ showed us, is that we feel our feelings all the way. And so I love what you teach about processing negative emotion, because that feels like the how to feel your feelings. So maybe first, how do you know when what you actually need to do is process negative emotion? And then what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so the truth is negative emotion is part of a natural, healthy human experience, right? If we look at mental illness, sometimes, like at an extreme, a sociopath doesn't feel remorse, doesn't feel some of the negative feelings that some of us might feel, right? So it's optimal mental health includes a great deal of negative emotion. We talk about it as though it means we're sick, right? Like, I have anxiety, just like we'd say, I have the flu. But the truth is, when you have the flu, maybe you need rest or medication or whatever. When you have anxiety, congratulations, having a human experience. So anytime you feel negative emotion, you just need to process it. Anytime, always. And I know that sounds weird, and what does that even mean? And feel your feelings is real trendy right now, but that's because it's good advice. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, a lot of practices, a lot of spiritual practices, meditation, prayer, but my favorite way is just breathing. If you think about all the automatic things our bodies do, like our heart pumps blood and our blood pressure, so many things just happen without us having to. Breathing is the only one that we can actually just do. Like, if I wanted to speed my heart rate up, I could only do it by doing jumping jacks or something. I can't sit here and go, I think I'll pump blood faster. But I can breathe. I can breathe faster. I can breathe slower. And it affects every other automated part of my body. And it's, I think, the best way to process emotion. Just deep breaths in, deep breaths out, and all the while remembering I'm just feeling a feeling. It's normal. My body knows what to do.
So, it's back. So when this is mine. So when you start recognizing, like, I am having these overwhelmingly negative feelings, and I think a lot of people will relate to that. If you're in like a Fowler stage 4, or if Brian McLaren would call it maybe perplexity, if you're in that part of your faith journey, you might feel angry or sad, or there might even be some grief. But I think I recognize this scramble. I wanted to hurry and find new thoughts and just feel better. So where does processing negative emotion fit in this whole process of moving forward? Because I think you can really get stuck there in feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
So when?
Well, for me, if I'm experiencing intense emotion, I try to stay out of my head because usually my thoughts are going to run away. They're not all going to be logical or kind or useful. And it's hard for me to do thought work, if you will, when I have intense emotion. So if I'm experiencing intense frustration or sadness or fear or whatever it is, I tell myself, okay, I guess we're going to do some sadness right now. And I try to get into my body. I try to think, where is that sadness? What does it feel like? Oh, I feel it. I feel it in my gut. And I all the while, deep breaths in, deep breaths out. And usually it doesn't take very long. And by the way, all the while I'm like getting kids ready for school. And I don't get to sit down usually and process feelings. You can do it while you're living your life. You're driving to work. It's like you're putting some sadness in your purse and taking it with you that day to work. And so it doesn't take very long of doing that before your rational, logical brain becomes more available. And now you can start sifting through, what do I want to think and believe here?
Yeah. And it's surprising because it feels like you lean all the way into whatever that negative emotion is, and it just moves through you so much quicker than when you throw everything you have at not feeling it. So it's surprising, and it totally works.
That's right.
I've heard you redefine the church, and I want you to talk about that. How instead of always using the term the church, how can we kind of, because I think that sort of implies that we're talking about maybe a hierarchy or a place. We're talking about leadership, and it feels very outside of us. So how do you think redefining the church as a relationship, this is something you bring up in the course, how can defining the church as a relationship help us move into from crisis to journey?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the course, we have a really interesting, deep discussion on this, and Bill Turnbull has some really amazing thoughts to add on this topic. As soon as we say, and I hear this a lot in my coaching too, right? People will say, well, I just wish the church didn't teach this, or I wish that the church didn't say this or feel this way, or at the church, we have to do this. And it is automatically a separation, right? If my family, I love them. Some of them are here today. But I don't love everything about all of them and everything they do. I have some thoughts about how they could be better, right? As they do with me, I'm sure. But I never say the family. I say my family. Or even if I'm gossiping with one of my siblings, I say, in our family, we always do this, or we struggle with this. I say our family because I identify myself as part of the family. And I know that I have influence on that family, and I contribute to that family, sometimes for good and sometimes not. And if we could redefine the church is actually all of us. We are the body of Christ, and we are his hands. And that's been really powerful for me, is to know that when I'm at church, and it's true, sometimes somebody giving a lesson says something that I think, is that really true? But what I do is I raise my hand. And then they say, yes, Sister Moore again has something to say. And I say, I just think we should also remember this. And in a very, I hope, respectful way, I contribute to my church. And I think it's important that we include ourselves in the church, because not only is the church there to help us, but we have something to give.
Thank you. So last couple weeks ago, we asked on social media for people to send us persistent thoughts that were causing pain or tension in their faith life or their church life. And we got dozens and dozens of responses almost immediately, like within the first couple of hours. And the thing that was kind of breathtaking to me is that we got so many of the same answers. Like there were 3 that just came up over and over and over again in different words. And it was heartbreaking because the first one was, I don't belong. And I just wanted to be like, oh my gosh, do you know how many people just sent that exact same message? I don't belong. So I want to try and just I'm going to give you the top 3, and I would love for you to just give some direction to anyone who feels stuck on this pain point too, and maybe just send us how can we start pulling apart these thoughts? Or is it about choosing another thought? Is it about maybe we're going to do some pain processing? What would you suggest for some of these thoughts? So number 1, I don't belong.
Yeah.
Or some, I feel like the point was usually like, if people really knew me, I don't belong.
Yeah. Okay, so what we always do when we identify that it's a thought, it's not a fact, you don't belong, right? It's a thought, but that's not to say it's not a valid thought. All of us have very good reasons for what we're thinking and believing, okay? I'm not talking about just dismissing it, like just stop thinking that, think positive. That is not what my work is about. It's about unraveling it, holding it in front of you like Play-Doh that's messy instead of tightening it into a tight ball. And so I don't belong. I do this with myself all the time, actually. I just question it. Like, is that true? What does that even mean to belong? How would I know if I belonged? Am I assuming that everybody else that is going to church does belong? What does belonging even mean? And should I feel like I belong? Or maybe should I feel like I sort of stand out? Like we just sort of start playing with all the options. It assumes, there's all kinds of assumptions under that thought. That it would be better if I did belong. Maybe I don't want to belong. You know, in the end, you can get to a thought, it still needs to feel true, but we want to get to thoughts that make us feel how we want to feel when possible, right? If we have a thought and we're feeling the emotion, we process it, we be human. But then we take a look at, how do I want to feel when I go to church? If I feel defensive and I feel resentful because I'm thinking I don't belong, is that how I want to feel? And sometimes the answer is yes. And I say, all right, do that then. And when you're tired of yourself, then come back to me and we will play with it until we find another thought. But the truth is, belonging is just such a complicated thing. And I mean, we might land on a thought like, none of us belong. We're all kind of messed up. We're all just a bunch of messy humans doing a great job and a terrible job, and none of us belong, and it's okay. But it's hard to say without having a specific person there, to talk through it with.
I will tell you, I often, Tim can attest, I often do models during church and I just write models and models and models. And there are so many epiphanies that happen when you're doing that, especially while you're in real time. Like in the middle of the struggle I'm writing, that is my thought, I don't belong. And it was like such a mind-blowing experience to just walk through and realize when I feel like I don't belong, I withdraw. Like I full on withdraw because I feel ashamed and embarrassed and I feel awkward. And then my result is that like, I don't know anybody. Like I'm not asking people's names. I'm definitely not like gonna go sit by somebody because I feel like an outsider. And so like it was just like, it seemed so simple, but until I wrote it down, I didn't see that like I was stuck in this loop of being so sure I didn't belong that I made sure of it.
Yeah, that's the power of putting it in that model, is the result always starts from the thought. So what's important to know is that your brain wants to be right more than it wants you to feel good or achieve your goals. So if the thought is I don't belong, that's why we withdraw. The brain's like, okay, well, let's distance ourselves because we don't belong here, remember? And then we create a lack of belonging. So that awareness, and then make sure you don't start judging yourself. Don't go, okay, I shouldn't be thinking that. I should think I belong. No, just like let it be curious about it. Give that to God. Yeah. Give that over to Christ and be like, this is what feels so true to me. I don't know what to do with it. I see what I'm creating. I know it's optional, but what do I do next? That's where I have found this spirit to really be useful in my life.
Thank you. I love that. Okay, we're going to do these two last ones really quickly, even though they're so big and they're very heavy. I feel kind of nervous even to tell you. I don't know where we're going to go.
We got this.
Okay, so the first one is...
Why are you so scared? You got this.
No, I feel like I feel it.
Yeah.
It's real. I think it's real. It really surprised me that a lot of people said this. It's some version of, I am afraid that my church is doing harm, and am I complicit by staying?
Yeah. Did everybody hear that? Yeah. Like I said, our thoughts are valid. We have good reason for believing them, and especially because we're trying to be good people here, right? We want to contribute something good in the world. So when we take something like very broad, this is a broad thought, right? I'm afraid the church is doing harm. Am I complicit in staying? Well, what part of the church? One of the things that's helpful is to get more specific. So if somebody brings me that, I would say, tell me about a specific thing, a specific Maybe this person said this thing at general conference on this day, or my bishop said this thing, or whatever. Like, we got to get specific, because when problems are broad, then solutions are really hard to find. But specifics are easier. So I would say, tell me about a specific way in which you think the church might be doing harm. And go ahead. I'll just
I'm not
cut
volunteering a
right
real
now.
answer here, but I do think that really does help. Like, I want to speak to the people who are like, something was literally said, and these were the exact words, and it did immediate harm.
Yes. Okay. And then we start to pull it apart again. First, we have to examine, how do you feel when you think that thought, right? Most of us, when we think a thought like that, we feel confused, frustrated, sad, scared, something like that, yes? Okay. Then I say, how do you show up in this circumstance for your church community when you're sad, scared, confused, afraid, right? We tend to, when we're afraid, we hide. Sometimes literally under the covers. Sometimes just we stay in the back of the room. Sometimes we keep quiet. Sometimes we get on Instagram anonymously, but we hide, okay? So then I ask, is that you contributing good in the world or not? And I genuinely don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe sometimes the best thing I can do is be quiet, okay? But ultimately what we will see is, if I think my church is doing harm and I'm complicit here, is I'm going to be creating some kind of harm, even if it's just in my own life. I'm going to be doing harm on top of harm. Okay, so we just have to acknowledge, first of all, this feels like an important thought, and maybe it is, but also maybe it's not. That's what we use the model to examine. Okay, and then we play with the literally millions of other possible thoughts you could think. And for me, sometimes it's just beginning with, how do I want to feel? Who do I want to be? Like, I like to think about the church, my church, our church, as like Thanksgiving dinner. And, we're all going to bring something. And I'm like, you're bringing pumpkin pie, and you're bringing stuffing, and you're bringing turkey, and I'm bringing whatever I'm bringing. And that's how I like to think about our community. I'm like, okay, this person who gave that talk brought something that I don't like. And sweet potatoes. No, not for me. I know some people like those. Not me. But what am I bringing? Am I bringing more sweet potatoes? More harm? More judgment? More rejection? More fear? Or am I going to bring mashed potatoes? And I'm going to bring some love and some compassion and some kindness. And that looks different for all of us. So I'm not telling you to do mental gymnastics. I'm not telling you to ignore things that feel really wrong to you. I'm saying, make the decision from your highest self, from your most trusting, loving, abundant, confident self, not from your fear-based, resentful, angry self. That's not where we want to make big life decisions from. And that it requires playing with all the complexities. I'll give one quick thought that might be available in that situation, which is, good thing I'm here, because I'll raise my hand and give the opposite view. I mean,
that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you. I know everybody's probably curious what the last one is, and we're kind of out of time, but I think this probably is very applicable to the third one too, which was, as a woman, or an observation that it feels like women are valued less than men. And this has been such a powerful, the model has been such a powerful tool for me in this exact space, because what it revealed to me is that I definitely suppress myself when I have that thought. Like, I step down, and like, I feel like I don't have power, and I am quiet. And you have a really incredible moment in the course where you really break this down. So maybe we can leave it at that. If there's anything you want to say specifically to women, I think what you said about being complicit is also just, that's very useful for a woman who's feeling this exact situation.
Yeah. Again, for me, sometimes where I find peace is if I have the thought, women are valued less than men in the church, I can find lots of evidence that is true. I can find lots of evidence that is not true. But sometimes the most peaceful thing for me is like, yeah, maybe. Sometimes some people in our church value women less than men. Some maybe even practices or policies in the past have come from a devaluing of women. Okay, but they're wrong. women aren't less valuable than men. The people who think that they just have misunderstood some things. And again, that's why I need to stay in this church, because when necessary, I point things out and I make suggestions and I raise my hand. Again, I'm not saying it's true. I agree with they value women less than men. I'm just saying sometimes the most peaceful way around a thought is to just go, okay, so now what? What do I want to bring? Maybe it's true that again, don't make broad generalizations. The church doesn't value women less than men. But do some people? Yeah, maybe. Welcome to planet Earth.
Yeah. Yep.
So now what? Now who are we going to be in the end?
Thank you. We need to wrap up, but if you just need more, this course is incredible. It's not just Jody coaching and explaining tools and also coaching live, but there are hours and hours of supplemental material that will keep you busy.
I want to say a quick thank you to all the participants, because real live people came and shared their real, very vulnerable situations, and we got really deep digging through it all, and it's so powerful. And so thank you to those people in Faith Matters. And I'll be out in the hallway at the break and after and before if you have questions or you want to learn more about the course.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jody Moore.